Since this is a Node course, we won't be spending too much time on our front end, but for now we'll dedicate this lesson to setting up our front end, and the rest of the videos and chapters will be focused on Node once again. Let's continue in our index.html. We will begin by specifying our doc type as HTML. So let's replace line 1 with an element that starts off with an exclamation mark, then doc type, and then we specify HTML. Now, in order to make our layout look good, let's use a library called Bootstrap. Head over to getbootstrap.com, then select Get Started. Here we can copy the style sheet link from the CDN the website provides and paste it into our HTML. So let's scroll down and let's copy the style sheet link. And then back in our editor, let's paste that in. If we save this, then we go to our web page and we go to the Network tab and refresh. We can see that Bootstrap is being loaded. Then back on the Bootstrap page, we'll need to copy one other thing. We'll copy over all of the JavaScript links from their CDN examples, which will include jQuery and 2 other JavaScript files that Bootstrap can utilize. So I'll copy that and once again paste it below. Let's save those and give it a try. Back in our web page, we can see that it's loaded the JavaScript files. For our demo application, the most important will be jQuery. We'll be using jQuery in order to inject our data into the HTML and bind to certain events, since we are not using a framework like Angular or React. Let's go back in our editor, and we'll begin by placing a Bootstrap container element. A container element creates a fixed width container that centers our content inside. So we'll start with a div, and then we'll use a Bootstrap class called container. Then inside, we'll place a Bootstrap Jumbotron. This will contain our message sending elements, and the Jumbotron is a Bootstrap component that allows us to focus or showcase specific elements on our site. So we'll place another div and add the Jumbotron class. Then inside, let's add a header with h1, and we'll use class display-4 to set the style of the header, and then the text will be send message. Let's save that and take a look. So we'll refresh, and we can see our reactive container in Jumbotron. I'll also add some space by adding a break above the Jumbotron. So I've created a new line and added a BR element. Let's refresh. And now we can see there's some space in between the Jumbotron and the top of the browser. Next, let's create an input inside the Jumbotron after our title send message. And I'll use another BR to separate them. And I'll use the class form-control from Bootstrap. And I'll use a placeholder and set it to name. Let's take a look at that. Then finally, let's add a button. So I'll use another break and then add a button. The text will be send, and we'll use a Bootstrap class or several classes, the first being btn for button, and then btn, so that we get the success styling on the button. Let's take a look at that. The next thing we'll do is add a div where the message history will be shown. Let's add that below the Jumbotron. So I've added a new div on line 16 below our Jumbotron on line 9. We'll give the div an ID property and set it to messages. That way we can access it by ID with jQuery. So in the div tag on line 16, I'll add an ID property and set it to messages. Now that we have our HTML set up, let's add in some JavaScript. We will put in some script tags below our main div and put in a callback function for jQuery document ready. So below our last div on line 19, we'll add a script element. We will use the shorthand version of the document ready event function, which is just $, and then parentheses. Inside here, we can add our callback function with an arrow function. The document ready event will be called when the document finishes loading. That way we know all of our elements are ready to be used. And for now, we'll do a quick console log test to make sure everything's working so far. Let's go back to our web page, select console from our developer console, and then refresh. And you can see we're getting our loaded text. The next thing we'll do is create a function that will allow us to add messages to our message history. So below our document ready function that's located on line 21, we'll create an add messages function. And it will take in a message object. Then let's access the message div through its ID and append some HTML to it. So we'll use the jQuery shortcut and then pass in the ID with hash messages. And this will match the ID on line 16. Then we'll use .append, and then we'll add in some HTML. We'll start with a header 4 for the title, which in this case will be the message name. And I'll use JavaScript template literals, so instead of a single quote, I'll use a backtick to surround the header 4. Then I'll use the $, and the curly braces surrounding message.name. Then another space, and we'll close the header 4. Then we'll add a paragraph tag, and we'll place message.message inside. Then let's close the paragraph tag. If you're not familiar with JavaScript template literals, this allows us to inject variables, for example, into strings. We could use other formatting methods, but I find that this is one of the cleanest methods. To test this out, let's call our new function inside document ready. So on line 22, instead of our console log, we'll call add messages. And then let's pass in an object that has a property name, and then we'll set that to a placeholder called Tim, and then a property called message, and we'll set that to hello. Let's save that and reload our page. And we know our function's working since we see the example object. The next thing we need to do is make our send button do something. So let's give the button an ID and then create a click callback for the button click event. So on line 14, let's add an ID to the button tag, and I'll call it send for now. Then inside our document ready, above our add messages test, let's use jQuery to access the send button with hashtag send, and then we'll use .click to bind to the click event by passing in a callback. Inside the callback, let's just copy line 25 and then paste it inside. Let's save that and give it a try. So I'll refresh, then I'll hit send. Each time I hit it, it will add a new message object. And that's it for now with our front-end app. Next, let's focus on getting some actual message data to and from our backend.